All right. Well, I am showing that we're just about one past the hour, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to CSL in Session and the final webinar in our Everyday Library Evaluation series. This session is going to focus on analysis and visualization. So my name is Christine Krieger, and I'm the Professional Development Consultant for the Colorado State Library, and I'll be tech support for today. But before we get started, I wanted to just briefly introduce CSL in Session for those of you who may not have a chance to attend before. You may be used to webinars where there's just a presenter who's going to talk at you for a while, and we do have some great experts in the room today. But we also want to hear from you, things that you've tried, questions you might have, experiences that you might have in this area, so that we can engage everyone in a conversation around the topic and benefit from each other's expertise and experience. So we hope that you will join the conversation and share your comments and questions throughout. The primary way you will be participating is through chat. We will ask that you remain muted and until the end, when we may have time to have you unmute for questions. Do, however, feel free to have your video on or off as you prefer, and do feel free to ask questions along the way via chat. I'll help to monitor those. We are also recording today's session, and the archive will hopefully be available by tomorrow, if not the next day, on Libraries Learn, and I will email everybody who registered for the session a link to that archive. We do have automatic captions available for today's sessions, and you can turn it on or off using the CC button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. I think you should all see the CC button. Zoom changed its interface. It was either last week or this week. So buttons are kind of in a different spot, but if you don't see it, click on more and that option should appear. And then the corrected captions will be posted along with the archive in a couple weeks. The archive should be posted early, and then I'll make sure to get those captions corrected. So I am now delighted to introduce today's presenters. We have staff from the Colorado State Library's Library Research Service. So I'm going to let you guys take it away.
Am I sharing the right screen? Yes. Okay, very good. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Dana Peterson with the Library Research Service. I'm a data coordinator, and Sarah Weissen, a research assistant at LRS, is co-presenting with me today on a little bit of analysis and data visualizations. If you attended the first couple, you learned some questions and thoughts for creating some surveys or assessment tools or evaluation tools, the ethics behind that. You have thought through how you're going to collect the data, what you're going to collect. And so our scenario today is we're moving forward. We have some data. What are we going to do with it? And here we go. Too many things happening. This is kind of our layout for today. As Christine said, go ahead and put questions in the chat if you'd like to, or jump in on microphone. And we're going to head through, we're going to show off a little shameless promotion of some LRS data visualizations first, and then move into a couple of things that can go wrong. I'm sure all of us are familiar with bad data vizzes, as all the cool kids say these days. Sarah's going to walk through some ideas and thought processes behind cleaning data, which is super important, and also the accessibility things you need to consider. Who is your audience for the data? What sorts of things do you need to keep in mind as you're creating charts or graphs or infographics to communicate what you've learned from your survey? So, and then at the end, I'm going to walk through some really simple examples of tools, hopefully using tools you already are familiar with. We're going to stay in the Google sphere today, but a lot of what I show you also works in Microsoft. We're going to work on Sheets and Docs and a little bit in Canva. More libraries are talking to me about using Canva, and I've seen that they're using Canva for flyers and brochures and newsletters. It can also do data, so we'll spend a little time there. So, my slide's not advancing. what's been framing the first couple and this session as well is this data evaluation life cycle. And like I said, you've thought about your problem, your question, what you want answers for. You've done some careful data collection. You now have a pool of data. And so that's where we're at, this analysis, synthesis, data use, and some visualizations. And so where do we go from here? Well, stepping aside, like I said, a little shameless promotion, LRS does data. That's what we do. That's what I do, certainly. And so I have created some dashboards on the LRS website that anybody can access right now. And I'm hoping it's useful to you. I'm going to pop over and show you that. If you go to the lrs.org website, you can get right to data dashboards here. And I'm going to kind of just walk quickly through a couple of sets. And I think Amy's going to put that link in the chat. If we go to these are PLAR. So this is Public Library Annual Report data. It's our most readily available data source. Because why? Because you have to give it to us every year. Public libraries in Colorado have to give that to us every year. So just real quickly, this is not a visualization per se. It sort of is, I guess, but basically it's just a bunch of numbers thrown at you. But if you're a library, you're getting ready to go to some community event or a board meeting or something that you want some quick down and dirty data about your library, this dashboard can do that for you. I've got just 3 years of data going back in it and kind of the big picture statistics for your library. What are the things that almost all libraries keep track of pretty well? So you can select your library and take a look at those stats, and it's kind of a rip and read. You can download a printable PDF of that, or you can download a CSV of that data and then go do your own analysis. So that's one of the dashboards. If you want to do a little bit more, say, comparison, who doesn't like to compare salaries? A dashboard like this lets you do that. It's got some filtering built in, but again, it's not really a visualization per se. It's kind of it's just a tool. I wanted to show it to you to let you know that something like this would be something LRS could help you produce if you want. And any step along the way of your journey with data in your library, if you want us to help put together a survey or focus groups or whatever it is, we can help you along the way. If you've got some data and you want to make some sense of it, want to do some analysis, that would be another thing that we could help you with. This tool is interactive, meaning I can filter and I can say, I only want to look at supervisor salaries for libraries with a certain size, LSA population, legal service area population. You can filter that. Interactive. That creates issues and challenges when it comes to being accessible. And in the landscape we're in right now, we're all learning that every day at the state library, how best to make and keep our stuff accessible to people. Again, download a PDF, download a CSV of that data if you want to. That's all real PLAR specific data. One other resource that we've come up with more related and tied to the library standards is a set of dashboards that has done a little bit more of the heavy lifting. It's done some chewing on the data and come up with more what I would consider true visualizations. For instance, here's per capita spending on library collections, and we've brought in statewide data as well as national data, but you can also narrow down to your own library as well and take a look at where you stand in relation to people in the state, and some other visualizations, just different ways of parsing and looking at that data. So I just kind of wanted to let you know about that's there and available to you right now. Anybody, and we can tweak any of that or come up with specific reports for you if you're interested in any of that.
Dana, there was a question in chat that's kind of PLAR specific, so it might be something that you want to follow up with later. But
Okay.
somebody was interested to know if there's a way to see specific instructions given to libraries for completing the different data items.
Yes, we have a a guide for the definitions of the questions? Is that what the question is?
Possibly.
Yeah, that would be great. And Dana, I can follow with you offline.
Yeah, sounds good, Elena.
Okay, thank you all.
You bet. Okay, so that's a little bit of the PLAR data and some visualization, some ideas that we've come up with. But back to our scenario today, you have a data set and you are ready to make some sense of it. And it's kind of fun, gentle fun to poke at some bad ideas. So we thought we'd start with some of that first. And I would like you to jump in and chat or let us know what might be something that data visualization that maybe this is your data that you've come up with, your visualization. Shout out to Mike for pointing us to the Reddit thread, Data is Ugly, which is, oof, be careful, it's a rabbit hole, but what might be something amiss with this data visualization?
Someone mentioned color contrast and it's confusing to read, too many data points, too busy. Is it a line graph? Is it a bar graph? We don't know.
I mean, you could probably make sense of it in time, but maybe you're making your audience work a little bit too hard. There's that consideration. It makes me want to take up knitting. Not sure why, but it, yeah, perhaps not the best. And I came across this one as well. Hey, cool. I'm caffeinated, absolutely, no doubt. What's happening here? So we're looking at different things that have caffeine, but I would point you to the scale. Oh, 0 to 1 to 19, 20, 39. Wow. What are we doing there? So it's pretty. I love it. I love the cups. I love using the icons, but caution, maybe a scale is something to keep uniform, or it maybe explain to your intended audience, but just kind of for fun. And here's one that I came up with. Full disclosure, I used AI. I said, give me random numbers from 1 to 5 for 20 people that have submitted completed a survey of what do they think is the best place to buy coffee. I threw that into a Google sheet and I said, make me a bar graph. And this is what it spit out. Any ideas? I mean, it's clean. What's going on that might not be the best idea in this visualization?
Not great for color blindness.
Even though it's nice bright colors, the palette probably isn't the best. I'm noticing that it's chosen to stop at 50%. 50% of what? Maybe could have used labels. Good. It's not, there's nothing telling me what am I looking at. Most of us kind of go 1 to 5. We go up rather than down if we think about that. Perfect. Elena, I read your mind. So don't be fooled by the looks just because this is nice and clean and tidy. Oh, wow. Perhaps some more information would be helpful. So just to kind of give you a sense of where we're heading today and what we're doing, we're going to make I'm going to make some visualizations for you at the end. But first, Sarah's going to talk about data cleaning. Can be a tedious step, but it is super important to it's part of the process, and it's a beginning of your analysis of the data as well. It isn't just copying and pasting and moving columns and sheets around. It's a little bit more than that. And she's also going to talk a bit about accessibility and thinking about your end product. So take it away, Sarah.
Thanks, Dana. Uh, yeah, so it's fun to look at those misleading visualizations or kind of problematic visualizations and try to pick them apart. At least for me, I find that fun. But I wanted to back up first a little bit, even further than cleaning data, to why we visualize data in the first place, just to kind of frame this and the importance of what we're talking about here. Back when I went to a conference with the Research Institute of Public Libraries a few years back, and something that one of the presenters, Kate McDowell, said really stuck with me in her presentation, which is that library data needs story before storage. And that's just kind of stuck in my mind, and I like to share that out because I think it's really true. Like, if I asked here who anybody raise their hand if they like collecting information, I'm sure plenty of hands would go up, but I think there's a little more hesitancy. Like, once we gather that information, it really needs to be shared out in order to make the impact that we want it to have, like our intention of why we collected it in the first place. And this impact could be things like obtaining funding or shedding light about what your library has to offer, reaching more communities. And this data can't do that if no one sees it, and if the visualization doesn't adequately convey the data. So I know it can be really overwhelming to collect a bunch of data and then still face the question of how we're going to make sense of it, but we're going to start from the beginning here and kind of go through helping you do that. There also might be times when you want to compare. We're looking at the third bullet point down, draw comparisons with peer libraries. For example, you might want to see how different libraries are evolving in this post-pandemic era, or what your library can be doing more of better compared to other libraries in the state, or your peer libraries, some libraries that are similar in certain characteristics to your own. And really to learn from them, not to judge or make too many comparisons, but just to learn and grow in your library data journey. So just to recap this slide here, data visualizations can make data more accessible to people who can't spend time sorting through large data sets, don't have the time to do that, or interest in it. Then they can also be used in presentations to library boards. Thinking about your audience is very important to library boards or trustees. Make cases for things like more funding, upgrades to library space through peer comparisons. And really what we're trying to do in visualizations is highlight patterns or trends throughout the data, really get to that looking at how data is changing over time sometimes might be a goal, and then that can help you make future more informed decisions for your library. We can go to the next slide. All right, so here I wanted to start with kind of beginning one data set that I'm going to be looking at through several slides here and explain it a little bit. So what you're looking at here is a library's reference tracking data, which was entered into DART, which is a free reference tracker that is available to libraries and public institutions in Colorado. We did ask the library if we could use this data for this purpose. So getting permission, trying to follow those ethical procedures that Carissa talked about in that first session. And what this data shows is the number of questions asked in each question category, sorted by how long it took to answer the questions. And I know, obviously, for the sake of making the visualization large enough, I have covered up part of the spreadsheet, so I apologize for that. But even if the whole thing was available, it's still really hard for me to look at these numbers and find any meaning without first visualizing it and starting with a visualization, and then really honing in on what's the best visualization we can make with this data for who we're trying to share it with and the questions that we're trying to answer. And so we can go to the next slide here. And I started by cleaning the data. And I think when people think of data visualization, they often go to that chart I showed you on the slide before, like transforming that spreadsheet into that chart is data visualization. And that's not wrong at all, but there's so many steps that can go into making that visualization before you even start building out the chart that will really, really help set you up for success in your visualization. These include things like removing irrelevant data, removing duplicate data, improving the formatting so that whichever software you're using can work with it correctly and actually accurately display the data on the right X and Y axis if you're using those. Also, especially if you're making peer comparisons, part of my cleaning process is often calculating comparable units of measure. That's such as like things like per capita. If you're looking at a range of libraries with different legal service area populations, per capita, taking the moment within DAS to compare things such as circulation per capita instead of just overall circulation, because that would help you compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. And I think we can go to the next slide, look at some examples of cleaning data here. All right, so in the top left on this slide is actually what this data set looked like when we first exported it from DART, the reference tracker. And there's quite a bit going on in this top left spreadsheet. And I look at it and immediately go, oh, this isn't how I want this. So a few things that I started with to clean this data included removing the column that just has a 1 in it. And once I verified that that's not a relevant column. And also, you'll notice that the time frames for the time spent answering questions across the top are not in the correct order. It goes from 1 to 5 minutes, and then 11 to 15, 16 to 30, and back down to 6 to 10. And we've got the less than 1 minute and greater than 30 minutes across the top. And so my brain needs to reorder those in order to feel like I can start working with this data. And then also we've got a row in row 3 there where we have questions entered that are not, there's no label for what category of questions those were. We've got number of questions, but no question category. So I was able to learn that what the DART export was telling me here was these questions, this number of questions were uncategorized. They did not have a question category assigned to them. And I removed some irrelevant rows at the bottom where it says filter, put the header in the right, or what I would consider the right area to start making a visualization in Excel. This is, Dana's going to be working in Google later. These images are from work that I was doing in Excel. And so got me feeling like I was in a pretty good place with this data once I was able to reorganize it a bit, except then I tried to make a visualization with it's by no means large, 14 rows, but there's 6 time frame categories, and that I'll show you that visualization a little later. It turned out not looking like I wanted it to because it included so much information. Sliced too thin is what we often say at LRS. If you don't need 6 time categories, maybe don't use 6 time categories. So if we go to the next slide, I'll show you what I thought was my first, this is a clean data set. And then I ended up changing it quite a bit to actually be able to build a visualization out of it that I felt was helpful. So the things that I did in this data set were to combine and condense the categories. You'll notice in the top top data set here, each question category is shown as either reference, directional, or technology. And I did remove the uncategorized data, so that would be something I'd want to maybe make a note of if I was showing this to people as well. But I decided that I didn't really need to look at the subcategories for the specific scenario that I was working on and the specific questions I was trying to answer. Obviously, there's might be the questions you might want to answer out of this data set might look at specifically looking at just the questions categorized as technology and those sliced subcategories within. And that's really just fine based on the question you're trying to answer. But here I just wanted to condense things into these three larger categories of reference questions, technology questions, and directional questions. And then I really did not need those 3 or 6 different time frames, because it might not matter if someone spends 16 to for the questions you're trying to answer, if someone's spending 16 to 30 minutes versus over 30 minutes. I just split it up into the 2 of under 6 minutes or greater than 6 minutes spent on the questions, and made a much smaller table there to start working with my visualization. All right. So that's about all for cleaning data at the moment, but we can go on to the next slide. And I'm gonna zoom back out again a little bit and talk about accessibility before I show another slide with the visualizations. So visualizations, of course, are all, like, in general created to make data more accessible for a larger audience, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that accessibility and data visualizations easily go hand in hand. There's a lot to take into consideration. Just something that jumps to the forefront of my mind for starters is if visualizations are included as static images, then you'll need alt text for screen readers to make those images accessible. And I'm just going to briefly explain. There's a lot of resources out there for writing alt text, but for a chart, that alt text usually looks like a concise, short description about the type of chart you're using and the data contained within that chart. And so that's one of the things that I mean by that bullet point on this slide, write it out. But another thing that I mean by this bullet point, there's kind of 3 components to writing out the data. And another one is writing out the text, or within the text next to a chart, kind of the key takeaways from the chart, not relying solely on the chart within a report to convey your message, but always also putting, comparing it with text that can help readers understand what you want to show through that chart. And then the third thing that I mean by write it out is write out labels within the chart. So that's including titles and axis labels. I think on this chart, I actually skipped an axis label and then I added it in the next slide, you'll see. So I was trying to constantly thinking about, okay, what else does the audience need to know in order to be able to correctly interpret what I'm trying to show them. And then the last thing I'll say about making sure everybody can get the information within the chart is, well, not the last thing, there's actually a couple more, but one of the things about accessibility online is trying to make sure that if at all possible, you're able to direct people to the raw data used to create that chart as well. So everybody can get all of the data within the chart, not just a key takeaway that you really want them to see, but have the opportunity to look at that data deeper if they would like to. This next bullet, the top left, keep it simple, pretty straightforward. Just I am always talking about how the more simple a visualization is, the easier it'll be to understand. It's not necessary to make it the most colorful, complex. Like I definitely get caught up sometimes in wanting to make these visualizations that show everything I'm trying to say. And sometimes multiple visualizations with less information contained within them can really be more effective. So people can focus on the main takeaway one by one. Or yeah, so just it's not always, even though complex visualizations might be beautiful, they might not actually be exceeding at their real job of making data more understandable. To talk a little bit about this bullet point print versus digital accessibility, that's something that Dana just touched on. She was speaking below demo. Those are very interactive, digital, and that creates complications within accessibility considerations quite a bit. And it's often you're a little more dependent on the software you're using and how accessible that software is. So it's really kind of a case-to-case basis in that sense. But overall, you'll just want to think about how maybe tooltips are something, whether the screen reader is able to read those or not. And if you're printing it out, then something like adding a tooltip isn't possible. So you'll want to make sure that you really have the text around a visualization that helps give context to what you're sharing. Also thinking about how your color choices are going to look when printed. I've been caught off guard by that when sometimes shades that you think have enough contrast do not. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. I think we can go on to the next example here. All right, so this is the visualization I first made with that larger data set on the left versus you'll see why I started to make some decisions based on the question that I was trying to answer with the data set to really condense the data down quite a bit. And some of the things that I added and improved from one visualization to the next was adding that title, adding the axis labels, and also realizing that with 6 different time frames of time spent, the number of questions within each category is just too small to really be able to make any meaningful ways to decipher the two. This one on the left is more colorful and has more information included about the subcategories, but for the questions I was trying to answer, it wasn't a helpful way to visualize the data. So I created the 3 subcategories and then those 2 time frame categories. And I also changed the colors I use, which I'm just going to talk a little bit more about in the next slide here. All right. So to spend a little time on color and accessibility, just because almost every visualization I'm making, like what colors I'm choosing is a large part of making sure it is accessible, and it can be a really challenging piece for myself as well, and I think others too. And luckily, there's a lot of existing resources that can help you choose accessible colors for your visualization. One that I stumbled across and have really found engaging and helpful and has helped me learn how to make better color choices within my visualization, I used here on the left to, it lets you enter the color codes and then shows how different types of color vision deficiencies, people with different types of color vision deficiencies would see those colors side by side. So the colors in the top left under where it says true, that green and orangish, those were 2 of the colors chosen automatically in Excel in the visualization I showed on the previous slide in the left visualization. That's what Excel automatically said, oh, we're going to use these colors. When I went in and said, what's a recommended chart here? Those were the initial colors that showed up. And you can see how when I entered those color codes into this resource, people with a color vision deficiency called deuteranomaly the colors show up as very, very, very challenging to distinguish between the two. And I'd been trying to, pick accessible color choices, but it was difficult for me not being able to see what was distinguishable with different types of color vision deficiencies. This is a common one. There's many more. So this is not by any means comprehensive of what everybody may see, but it is helpful for me to be able, oh, those are definitely not the colors that I want to use to make a accessible visualization. On the other hand, the colors below the blue with different shades are much easier to decipher. So definitely a point that I've learned over the years is that oftentimes different shades of the same color are more accessible than different colors, because the different colors you use may have a similar shade, and that can be problematic. And about 1 out of 12 men and 1 out of every 200 women have color vision deficiencies. So it is really, really important to be careful with the colors you're using. I also added a link to the WebAIM contrast checker on this slide, which you'll have access to these slides after the session here. And that will help you make sure you're meeting accessibility standards in the colors that you're picking for your visualization as well. Honestly, I could talk about this for quite a while, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to say that Dana and I and everyone at LRS, again, these are questions that we'd love to help answer if you're having any issues with your own visualizations or just want more information on it. And with that, I think I'll hand it back over to Dana.
Any questions from anybody so far on this part that we can pause and answer?
I don't see any.
So I'm going to walk you through just a couple of simple examples of creating a chart in Google Sheets and also tying that together with a Google Doc. This is exactly or very similar to the same thing you could do with Excel and Word. Connect these things together. The scenario here being maybe you've got a monthly or a quarterly or annual report. I suspect some of you in this session have those. And the recreating of it every year can be tedious. So what if you had a template and those charts could update along with the text content that you are including? So we're going to jump back into a little bit much simpler data set. This is also from DART, got permission from the library. They were tracking how many reference questions they got during different hours of the day. And this was from the month of July, and they tracked them every hour. Some problems, just because I know DART, one little problematic thing for this is that there's a timestamp automatically given to when somebody put that message in DART or that tally, but there's also a field that lets them backdate them. So that might skew some of the hourly data. So this is kind of thinking back about the collection part and how might that impact the output. Nevertheless, it's a data set and we're going to work with it. So you've got your data set. It's in a Google Sheet. Notice for sure, I have started in A1. If you have, if you take away nothing from this except one thing, if you're doing a sheet and you want to make a chart, put something meaningful in cell A1, especially if you're going to use a tool that's going to help you automatically create that chart. That's where it's going to start looking, unless you very specifically tell it to look someplace else. But the easiest thing, the best, the cleanest way you can do it is make sure that your data is close together if possible. Clean it up. Oh, and we forgot. the very first ever thing you ever do with your data set is you make a copy of it and you put that original data set someplace and you never touch it unless you mess up the one you're working on, right? And then you can go back to that original. So this was not the data set that I was given or took from Dart, but I cleaned it up, super simple. Hey, let's make a chart. Let's not make this too complicated. I do need to tell Google what data am I going to use? Well, that's our drag and select. Computers may be getting smarter every day, every second, but they still need to know what data do you want them to look at? Well, here it is. And I'm just going to insert a chart. Bam, done. Not so hard. Let's see, what did it find and decide was important? It said, okay, a title, July versus time of day. Where did it come from? These two headers. It's trying to make sense of the data. Does it make sense for this chart? Not really, but that's where humans can still come in and do some things. It's decided to label this as July because it doesn't know better. It doesn't know what this was actually talking about. I can also clean that up. But it did put the times across the bottom. Super, super simple. We've got a little, hey, there's a little pattern happening. Move on over to, okay, this is your report. This is your document that you are working on for your whoever you're reporting to. Hey, let's put that chart in here. All right, so I'm going to go back to my chart. I'm going to right click copy because that's my favorite thing to do. Oh, wait, I can't do that with a chart. Right click on a chart gives you all these other options related to the chart, which are also showing up on the right here, the chart editor. So our good friend right click isn't going to work. Control C if you're a keyboard person, or Option C if you're a Mac person, that'll work. Command C. Or always edit copy will work as well. So I'm going to copy this chart, hop back over to my spreadsheet, and paste it. I have some options right away. Okay, I can link it to the spreadsheet. And let's pause for a moment and think for a second. An organization might be big enough to have somebody does the spreadsheets in their Google account, and somebody does the reports in their Google account. If those sheets and that document aren't shared between those accounts, we can't link them together. So that's a consideration. If you're doing a one-off report, it's not something you're going to update. You can just paste it unlinked and get on with your day and be done. The whole point of this is, though, we want it to update automatically and keep that data fresh and current. So I'm going to go ahead and paste it and link it. And there's our chart. Easy peasy. Another month has passed. I'm just going to throw in some made up data. We never do this at LRS. We're going to make up some data. I got to get my keyboard going. And I'm just going to throw in, maybe people are fairly consistent. And, what am I thinking about as I'm cleaning up this data and looking at it? I'm seeing some zeros here. I'm going to guess the branch of this library system probably isn't open after 7 or before 10, right? So do I need to include those timeframes at all? Probably not. I could probably just take those off. So here's some new data. I've added in August. I would like to get it in this chart. Again, I need to tell the computer, where do I want to work? I want to work right here. I could either right click, or here's our little hamburger menu. I want to edit this chart. A lot of things you can do here. Change the color, change the font, change the labeling, or you can change it in your sheet, either place. I'm going to focus right here on the series. The series, what's that? That's your data. So here's the series of data. We've got July. I want to add August to this chart. I could delete and recreate the whole chart. Oh, but if I do that, it will not be on the other sheet anymore. So I'm going to add the series. I'm going to use this handy dandy thing here where I get to select the data range. I don't need to type A1 colon blah, blah, blah. You can just highlight and go. Notice that I included the header. That's important. It needs to know what is this new data that you're giving me. And I click OK, and shabam, I've got my data in the chart. Super simple. It's giving me these color choices. It's not necessarily giving me accessible colors, so that would be something that might need to be cleaned up. It also hasn't quite figured out that, this is not what this is about, so maybe I need to do that by hand and say, reference questions by hour, something like that. Cool, so we've got some more data. Let's head on over back to our Google Sheet. Here is our chart. If I select it, oh, hallelujah, it worked. I have a chance to update this data. I update it. Super. Now I've got that data, another month's added. We're ready to go. I hope that's something not entirely, if it was nothing new for some of you, I apologize, but I hope for some of you, it maybe gets the wheels churning about how you can make some of your processes a little more efficient. If that was way too fast, I'm happy to get on a call with you or your staff person who does that sort of thing and help them set up something like this. So that's one tool. That's a Google tool way to do it. There is another tool that other libraries have been telling me about, Canva. And I'm also going to show how you can bring data into Canva. So we're going to head over to Canva. This is LRS has just kind of started exploring it a little bit, finding our way. And maybe you are a Canva shop. Maybe you actually create reports or newsletters in your Canva and you want to bring in some data, some visualizations in those. So I'm over here in my Canva and I'm going to choose a postcard. Even if I'm not going to print this, it's not a bad idea to build bigger than you think you might need in case that needs to be printed. We all know, I bet we've been to the point where you put a nice graphic that you've worked hard on into your document and then you print it out and it's fuzzy, or you try to make it bigger and it gets fuzzy, right? It's kind of a centuries-long problem. I'm old enough to know these centuries-long problems. So I'm going to choose a postcard for my template to start. And if you noticed, that postcard size, it gave us the size. A little over 5 inches by a little over 4 inches. Think of a postcard. When it comes time to share this document, download this document, say you're going to go print-centric, we all know the share button, although it used to be called download, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to go with Christine on this. Why do they have to change those? When you get to download it, you get this size option here. I wonder if I can zoom in on that a little bit. And all of a sudden, you're now being given these things in pixels. Pixels and DPI, dots per inch, are not the same. DPI relates to printing. Pixels refer to anything on a screen, right? But a good rough rule of thumb is that if you divide your pixels by 300, that will give you the rough size that something will print out well. So if we think about that 5 by 4, 1650 divided by 300, sorry, 1650 divided by 300 is a little over 5. So there's our inches. And 1275 divided by 300 is a little over 4. And notice Canva does give you a chance at the end. Holy cow, you can make this thing bigger. So if you are going print-centric with something and you want it to be 8 by 10, figure out the math on that. 2400 by 3000 would give you something that would print out at 8 by 10, right? So that was a little side note about print ready stuff. Let me zoom back out here. All right, so we're ready to put in a chart. It's an element, right? And I can search for it just by going to chart. I can choose oh my gosh, pie charts, bar charts, line charts. I'm going with bar chart because we're keeping it simple. Shazam, we have a bar chart. I apologize, I used to teach middle school. If I'm talking to you like 7th graders, so be it. So we've got some data. You can enter your data by hand right here if you want to. But why would we do that? We've got a beautiful data set, right? So let's bring that data set in. We've got a couple of ways to do it. Google Sheets, or you can upload your data. And that upload can be an Excel, a CSV or a TSV. I had to remember what that was, tab separated files instead of comma separated. I'm going to show you how to do the Google Sheet, but I need to put up a huge red flag here and a caution that Canva is an online tool. Google is an online tool. They talk to each other if we connect them and let them. If you have PII, if you have private information in your data, when you are giving Google access to it, you're giving when you're giving Canva access to your Google Drive, you're giving them access to everything. So think through that carefully before you decide to do this, because there are privacy implications, and you'll see in a second. So I'm going to say, okay, I want to bring in my data from a Google Sheet. It immediately pops out and says, well, what Google account do you want to use? So this is similar to the Google Sheets idea. If your Canva account is somebody's and they need access to the other Google account, just think that through, make a flow chart, figure out who's in charge of what, but also think about what data is behind that, right? So I'm going to connect to this Google account, and here's where we get all the things about privacy and what are they going to do with your data? Well, it's Google. They're going to take it and they're going to do the things that they do. Right? So they're warning us and they're letting us know. And I did a little testing to see if I could reduce the access a little bit, even though it kind of looked like maybe you could, it didn't work. So either I wasn't smart enough to make it work, or you really don't have that much of a choice on limiting what it can see. For our purposes, heck, we're going to rock on. We're going to say, yeah, okay, connect to my drive. Now I am seeing a list of all of the spreadsheets, Google Sheets, that exist in this Google account that I connected to it. And I'm going to go ahead and choose the same data set we've been working on, the reference questions by hour. And great, it found something. It tells me what cells it's looking in. Oh, it's going to start where? At A1. It's important to have that A1. If it was elsewhere, is it smart enough to go find it? Probably, but help it along. There will be fewer problems if you can kind of keep your data organized in a fashion like that, starting at the top left. And here we go. Here's a data set. Here's a bar chart. It found, oh yeah, both months, because we'd add August in that. Whew, not sure about these color combinations. They are different shades, which is awesome. Different shades of the same color, great. Let's add a title in here. Let's see, reference questions by hour. Yep, that. And ooh, it's big. And let's throw it up here. Looks pretty good. Accessibility, that looks okay. I'm not sure about the contrast here. What if I'm not super smart? Let's take a step back. What if I'm not super smart? And actually, no, let's use Canva's tool first. Canva does have an accessibility tool. Looks super promising. File accessibility, check my design accessibility. Awesome. It does a little magic. It says my typography is fine, related to my font and my sizes there. It says my color contrast is fine. Oh, good. It says, hey, you need some alternative text. That's great. I can add that. I'm not going to do as good and thorough a job as Sarah did, but I'll give you a start. Bar chart with data. Let's see. Reference tallies for July and August. It's a start. It's not great. It's a start. Okay, I have no accessibility issues. This is fantastic. What if I'm not super smart and I say, I want that heading to be this color? Ah, awesome. It changed and said, you've got a color contrast issue. What if in my chart, I also change one of those colors, but I fix this one? Uh-oh, I now have no issues remaining. So unfortunately, the Canva accessibility tool does not dig into the charts. It will not help you with color contrast only on those charts. So too bad. It is still pretty useful though. For instance, if, let's say now you have another Canva design, you can just drag and drop or copy and paste this chart into your other Canva design. The other benefit I see is, oh, let's say another month has passed. Let's throw in September. Let's just copy and paste this. Oopsie, did I do that? Okay, I did. All right, so we've got another month of data. Does Canva also give us that auto update option? Let's see. We go back to data. Woo, it's there, it's there. Does it work? Does it work? It does. Fantastic. So now we've got 3 months of data. I can throw that into my new report or brochure or flyer or newsletter and be good to go. So hopefully that is some tools that you can use when you're on your data visualization journey to get some data out there in a meaningful way to your stakeholders. And I did give you that little bit of math equation there to rough guide. 300 pixels is about an inch when you're going to print something out. And that is about the end of our presentation. Happy to take questions or comments or anything from you all.
Yeah, so we do still have a few minutes remaining in the hour. So if you guys have questions, you want to pop in chat, or if you want to unmute and ask your question, you can do that too.
And oh yeah, a survey. We focused on quantitative data heavily in this. As my boss said just last week, qualitative data, those answers what small groups, focus groups can give you, short answers to surveys, that's a lot harder to parse, and a true meaningful data visualization from that is something that takes a lot more work. If that's something you're interested in, please let us know in the survey that would be a topic of interest that you would like to see a session or contact us. And Amy and Sarah are really the pros on that. I like to stick with the straight up numbers.
Yeah. We considered trying to include it in this presentation, but it was just felt like we were trying to pack too much in, but we're very, very happy to talk to you about it at any time.
And you can use the QR code on the slide, or you can use the link that Amy dropped into chat to access the survey. We'd love to know what you thought about today's session, what you liked, what you didn't. It is anonymous, so you can get that filled out. And I don't see any questions coming through. So I really want to thank LRS for doing this series for us. Once again, if you didn't have the opportunity to attend the first two, you'll be able to access them when I send out the link to this one. And hopefully I'll have that sent out by tomorrow. It might be sometime between tomorrow and Friday, depending on when I can get that sent out to everybody, but everybody that registered will get a copy of it. Yeah, we appreciate everybody attending today, and we hope everybody has a great rest of your afternoon.